with Jeff Erdmann, founder of InsideMDSports, as we continue to preview Nebraska's football schedule this season. Jeff, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Jeff, we're good, man. It's good. It's good to talk to you. It's been a little bit, and I was very happy that that Maryland was on the same day as Nebraska as I was down at Big Ten Media Days, because I always think Coach Locksley's interesting, right? He's a really good recruiter. He seems like a straight shooter. I was vibing with the red slacks. I thought he looked sharp. I I always try to put two and two together based on the product that I see on the field versus the guy that I hear talk. How closely for you in this 7 years has these things been related? How closely is what we think we see versus what we see on Saturdays related to Coach Locksley?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think he is a pretty straight shooter. He's not one of these robotic coaches who's just going to spew a bunch of cliches. Of course, at times, you're going to get those with any coach, but what you see is pretty much what you get, and that's why the fans have grown to like him. Even though now at this point, they want to see kind of a bounce back season this year out of him. But yeah, that's pretty much who he is.
So one of the things that really caught me, I mean, you don't see a lot of coaches willingly admit that they lost a locker room, at least not while they still have that job.
Yeah.
How did that strike you? Was that something that maybe you were aware of last year, even if you wouldn't have used that terminology necessarily? Because I mean, honestly, I'm not that I pay the closest attention to the day-to-day of Maryland football, but that caught me off guard.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised really. He had mentioned that to me a little while ago, not necessarily in season last year, but he had, his biggest complaint was that Maryland was so far behind with resources. They had a $3 million roster, as he's mentioned, while some of these other Big Ten schools had many multiples of that. And, so he felt like for the first time you had a little bit of money to hand out, but not enough to go around. So guys were jealous, and that led to issues and things like that. And he feels like, he believes strongly that now that with revenue sharing, it's going to, even the playing field, at least to some extent, and give him a better chance of winning and keeping his guys happy.
So Jeff, what's the balance in terms of the transition of the culture? Right, I think you had 30 or 31 guys hit the portal. You got 24 freshmen. That's a little bit of a youth movement with new guys. How quickly do you think that can take based on what happened a year ago?
Well, I think, it's not a total rebuild. A lot of the guys replacing the guys who left were recruits that they were really excited about, or four-star guys, really talented guys. So they feel like there's more general talent on the roster this year. It's just a little more youthful, like you said, but not necessarily all freshmen. Malik Washington, the quarterback, being one of the biggest, examples of freshmen expected to help the team this year. But they also brought in a lot of pretty solid transfers. They have a bunch of transfers who should help them at several key positions. So they are relying on unproven talent, but there are some guys, sophomores, juniors, who should be pretty good.
Jeff, you brought up Malik Washington, expected to start at quarterback as a true freshman. DB mentioned the rest of the youth movement. What does that do with your expectations for the season? Obviously, we've seen really talented quarterbacks start as true freshmen that, really tend to have a little bit of a learning curve in that freshman year. What does that do for you when you're looking at this season and how you expect to go?
Yeah, I mean, you guys know as well as anybody what it's like for true freshmen to be starting the Big Ten. It's definitely a challenge. You're definitely going to take some lumps. It's hard to predict like a ton of wins with that, given you have a true freshman and a lot of question marks elsewhere. On the flip side, they play a very soft first three non-conference games. So if he is the starter, he'll have time to kind of get his sea legs. And, by all accounts over there, they say that he's lived up to the billing and then some, not only in terms of his physical ability, but also his leadership and ability to learn the system and all the intangibles. So, the question is, you really need a unicorn to have a winning season with a true freshman quarterback. So the question is he going to be that unicorn this year?
So So Jeff, it's and I was talking about Coach Locksley's recruiting prowess. He's done a really good job, and guys continue to hit the drafts, right? Like he gets guys that get paid on Sundays. Has that become like the benchmark for darts, or is it, well, we're getting good players, eventually we'll break through? Like, which way do you kind of see it going to date?
I think the mindset is more just about, like, a lot of it, like I said, it's about resources. I think he feels like he was out-resourced the past several years under NIL. But most of the NFL guys they've gotten have been lower three, maybe a handful of 4 stars. But I think for them, in terms of the draft, it's just a good selling point, that we have all these guys going to the NFL, and very few of them were highly regarded recruits, so we can develop you into that.
So you're going to want to be able to get stops, improve the defense from a year ago. We've heard a lot from guys like Wingate and Jalen Husky, but they were also there last year in that same locker room. Is that a pro this year, that you bring some experience back there with some leadership? They understood what happened a year ago. Is it good that they can know some history, but not, for lack of a better term, kind of be held captive by it?
Yeah, 100%. Both of those guys have taken the biggest vocal leadership roles on the defense and maybe the team as a whole. And, I think experiencing last year is definitely a benefit. You want to have, after a season like that, you don't mind necessarily replacing a lot of players, but you want to have at least a few guys who've been there and can lead. And so I think those two are arguably the 2 best players on the defense, maybe the best 2 on the team. So, that's the hope, is that those kind of guys will lift everyone else up.
Jeff, what positional unit are you looking at as kind of an X factor for Maryland on what their season can end up looking like?
Well, that's a tough one because there's a few for them. The offense and defensive line are both X factors. Offensive line was really poor last year, struggled all season, didn't really open up many running holes, and quarterback then Billy Edwards was beaten up pretty bad. So to me, that's probably number 1. But 1B would be the defensive line, where you lost 2 guys to the NFL draft. You don't have a lot of proven guys. They have some good players and some good transfers and young guys, but it's still both of those are still big question marks.
Who leads the way up front on the offensive line? Is it Wright?
Yeah, arguably Isaiah Wright. Last year he arrived from Buffalo, and there was talk he might be their best offensive lineman, and then he was lost for the season, never played. So he's a guy. Alan Herron is a guy last year who transferred from a lower level of college football, Division II school in Georgia, and struggled to adjust. They say that he's been a different guy this year, so he could be the anchor there too. So, they're optimistic about being improved, but when you have a lot of the same guys back, you really need to see it to believe it.
What happens with the ground game replacing a stud?
I actually think they might be upgraded there. Nolan Ray is the fastest player on the team. I think he's, has potential to be one of the most dynamic running backs in the conference. Last year, like I said, the running game struggled largely because of the offensive line. He still averaged 5 yards a carry. Now with Roman Hemby at Indiana, he'll be the guy. And Hemby the last year or two really wasn't hitting the home run very often. So I think you have a real chance to have a more consistent home run hitter back there.
That's interesting. Another man's trash is another man's treasure, or one man's trash is another man's treasure. Hemby is a guy that comes up in like this key departure, new arrival in Bloomington that, is kind of like this shiny new toy. It's interesting to get the perspective of from the Terps side, where it's like, I get the name, but we got to take a deeper dive in terms of the production, in terms of what was happening in the backfield. Is that kind of your stance on that departure?
Yeah, absolutely. And not to denigrate him, he's a really good player. He's accomplished a lot and an exceptional person off the field. But, that first year he was very explosive, hit a lot of big ones, and a little fewer the next year and then last year. And again, the offensive line didn't help, but He wasn't really breaking many tackles. So the question is, was that a wear and tear thing for him, or a thing where you need the offensive line to open up big holes for you, or was it, the way that you're using him? So I guess we'll find out at Indiana. If he has a huge year at Indiana, we'll know the answer.
Jeff, last one from me here. Obviously, we talked a lot about the new players and departures and things like that. We haven't yet touched on the new coordinators on each side of the ball as well. How much is that factoring in as you look at this season and looking at everything new for Maryland with Pep Hamilton and Ted Monachino?
Yeah, they really need those guys to pan out, to be upgrades. Pep and Locksley have been close friends for years, so there's a feeling there that on Locksley's end that he'll be an extension of Locksley as a play caller. He's been in the NFL. He's worked with some pretty big-time quarterbacks like Justin Herbert and Andrew Luck. So they feel like, he's the perfect guy to come in right as you have this potentially generational quarterback recruit in Malik Washington. And then on defense, Ted Monachino is kind of a mystery, really, because he spent most of his career in the NFL, hasn't been a college defensive coordinator before. It does sound like he'll be more of an attacking kind of style. Last year they were pretty conservative, and the sack numbers were way down, and so they feel like he'll be a little more aggressive. But again, he's never been there before, so there's no track record really to look at.
Yeah, he and Rob Ryan I'm fascinated with as Rob Ryan lands in SC as guys with such pro backgrounds. And it's not the first, right? Guys make it, but right here at home in the Big Ten. So last one for Pep, about Pep, Jeff. He's used to dealing with the media. He's very his delivery is no, it's interesting. How does his delivery in terms of dealing with the NFL media and the questions that he was asked and the pressure from where he came from, how does that play in with your media in terms of the kind of the candor in his delivery? What about has Pep's personality kind of endeared itself to the media yet?
Yeah. Well, it's really early to say. The only availability he's had really was on Maryland's local media day. But, for him, having been in the NFL where it's the big leagues and you're getting tough questions constantly, and as opposed to Maryland where, you're not, it's a million times easier, softer media lens, so he was insightful, smooth, seemed open. I think he's, this to him in terms of handling the media, this is small time compared to where he's been before.
That's Jeff Erdmann, founder of InsideMDSports. Jeff, appreciate the time, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jeff.